Forrest, you've been doing amazing work in South Sudan and Uganda, working with youth, working with child soldiers. How do we harness the potential of young people, including child soldiers, for positive social change in fragile settings?
When I look at the fragility concept of, looking at that it's about fragility, but I look at South Sudan as a state or a place where it's so fragile because of certain issues, large issues. It seems to contain most of them. The issue of 1.8 million people are displaced in the country. 1.7 million people are refugees from the country. One half of the youth, half of those children are out of education, the highest in the world. 50,000 people have been killed. We're on the verge of famine where half the nation is considered food insecure. So these are statistics that make it, I guess, be classified as the second most fragile state in the world. But what's the big question of the issues of fragility? I mean, certainly there's a larger frameworking of the governance and stuff. And by that I mean, how will we solve this problem of conflict that's making this place fragile? That issue of conflict, to be able to bring people together, to be able to, the UN and others at other states, to bring people together in this case, to be able to discuss so they can figure out how to proceed and try to get people to the table. But for myself, when I listen to Victor talking about the youth and about the power inside of them, it's a tack that I've taken, or a movement that I've taken up as a cause. I've been there since 2012. I'm just using an exponential discussion and be slightly different, I guess. I've been there since 2012. In 2013, the conflict broke out. We were training youths, and this goes to this point. We were training youths in conflict resolution, in ICT, in life skills, and also in business skills, because the livelihood issue is one of the largest and biggest issues. There was a conflict in 2013. They were scattered, but because of the training and because of their skills that they had acquired, they were able to start to lead people to safety across tribal lines. But then there was another issue of whether I would pull out or not, or whether I could make any contribution to this issue. So moved into the protection of civilian camps there. Started working with the youth there to build a sense of hope, to be able to move things forward for them and to give skills. We started with a sports program, a PhD sports program. There's about 4,000 people in that program, using that program. And what's happened was, because of a sense of purpose and certain things, the temperament of the individuals who were in the program started to adjust, started to see things more bilaterally, started to understand the conflict, even in this really distressed situation. From that, I took that point into going into the Eastern Equatorias. And the Eastern Equatorias, there we began to work with grouping of youths, working on these skill sets of conflict resolution so that they would be able to deal with their community, ICT so that they would be able to communicate even in these difficult environment of connectivity, livelihood and business skills. And then they take those skills back into their community and train people in those same modalities and start to create projects for their community during a time of war. What was interesting for me was that these youths, taking this training and these soft skills that they had, started negotiating conflicts in their communities. Yeah. It was about their own empowerment. Once they were empowered to do so, they started to go and negotiate even for the army to move out of schools. They negotiated tribal conflicts where people were stealing cattle. They were asked by the government to come in and train them in conflict resolution with the ministers and people of that nature. So what I was discovering was that if these things were availed to them so that they can be empowered to be able to utilize them, that they would be able to become, as Victor said, the peacemakers, to be the asset to bring peace, one of the assets to bring peace to the nation outside of the framework of the government agreements, you know. And then they took this training and started to develop projects during a time of war inside of their own communities that were income generating as best they could in every single county of that state. So then I started to realize, even through all of these, taking Donald's point of what the elements, what is makes something fragile, how we define it, if it's a fragile state or if it's something that is just a process of trying to find the next wave that will move us forward in a positive way. And what I found from them was that that's what was happening. Even at a time when I looked at the issue of refugees, because they were all going into Uganda, actually, a large portion of them. My youths weren't, but they were sending their families, so they were crossing borders. So then you have to go and look there, because a fragile community is forming inside of the camps. But there's a lot of things to be addressed when it comes to empowering the youth during these times of fragility. It's my quest, and giving them the resources to deal with the situation, because as in South Sudan, 72% of the people are under 30 years old. The youth is the nation. The youth have to be able to build it and rebuild it. Through these fragile times, they lose the skill sets to be able to do so, and we have to supply as much as we can. And then you'll find that they're going to do a lot of things, create a lot of things to move the nation forward. So this is the observation.
Fantastic. Just a follow-up question. I think it'd be very interesting for people to know, you're clearly a well-known artist, you're a celebrity. You've used that position and you've leveraged that position very effectively to bring about positive social change in Africa. Do you have a lesson, maybe some advice to potentially, particularly to African artists and African celebrities, how they can use their position to bring about the kind of positive social change that you've just mentioned?
I think as every person has the opportunity to be able to be an advocate to move things forward. Of course, they have a large amplifier because they're artists, and it's possible to do so in the advocacy level. It's not been a big picture element for me working on the ground in certain places. People don't even know who I am, you know? But when it comes to the larger space of being able to talk and bring it out to the nation states, to be able to get the UN to speak about certain things more or to advocate for those issues, it's very, very strong. And I think they should take the opportunity, as all citizens should, to let their voice be heard when other people are struggling and suffering from some of the fragilities in the world.
Thank you very much. I see we have 15 minutes left. We've got